So it's easy to yell run sideways when you're in the comfort of your theater, but if you were actually in a position where a spaceship was falling on you, it actually would be kind of easy to run sideways. I'm not sure where I was going with that. Hi, I'm Mike Siegel. I'm an astrophysicist. I write for Ordinary Times, and this is The Throughput. So at long last, we are delivering part 2 of my ranking of spaceships. This was the first video I had that ever went viral. It really built this channel. I had a lot of fun doing it, and you guys had a lot of fun watching it and commenting and recommending all kinds of ships that I could do in the next video, and you're finally getting it. I am sticking to my rule that I had in the first one, where I have to be familiar with the movie or the TV series in order to comment on the spaceship. So that does leave out a lot of really good ships that you guys suggested that look really interesting, that I could have some comments on. I may have to relax that rule if I do a third episode of this, because we're sort of running out of territory that I'm familiar with. So if I didn't address your ship, it's not because I didn't think it was interesting. It's probably because I didn't see it, or I only had a limited number of ships I could do in this video and still have it be under an hour. As with the last video, we're going to rank these ships on scientific accuracy, but we're going to give them bonus points for the rule of cool. Because I think science fiction should be scientifically accurate when you can, but there are times when you just want to do something cool, something that looks good, something that's amazing. I'm willing to let that slide if you can make me suspend my disbelief. It takes it a bit to make me suspend my disbelief, but I am willing to do it. And really, honestly, with all of science fiction, you're pretty much having to suspend some amount of disbelief. As before, the rankings from the highest to the lowest. Top ranking is Abduct Me Now. These are ships that are very scientifically accurate and also have some appeal to me from the rule of cool. Ships may get ranked up there if they have some very personal meaning to me, like the TARDIS in the last episode, but we'll see how many of these ships that applies to. Second tier is Enjoy the Ride. These are ships that are either very scientifically accurate but kind of leave me a little cold, or are moderately scientifically accurate but are cool enough to be ranked there. Not Great, Not Terrible from the Chernobyl series, that's basically in the middle. It's ships that are not terribly scientifically accurate, not terribly scientifically inaccurate, aren't awful in terms of how they look or behave in the series, but aren't really great and heart-stirring as well. Fails at MaxQ. This is when a rocket at its maximum stress blows up. These are ones that are up here below that. Not quite the bottom of the barrel, but pretty bad in terms of science fiction, and blows up on the launch pad. Those are our worst of the worst. And so this time we have 16 spaceships to rank. Let's dive right into it. Now, I normally do these in a random selection. In this case, rather than having a random selector on Google, I actually had my dogs do the random selection. So we're going to go in the order that they chose. But I am picking out one to be the first one because it was by far the most requested ship in my last video, which was the Rocinante from the TV series The Expanse. I really like this ship. One of the beauties of The Expanse is they try to make the space travel and the spaceships as scientifically accurate as possible. It takes realistic times to get from one place to the other in the solar system. They have to chart orbits so that they go from one planet to the other. And the spaceships don't have artificial gravity. They have to generate gravity either by rotation, which we've discussed in previous videos, or by constant thrust. And that is how the Rosinante generates her artificial gravity. The idea here is that if you have the ship under constant thrust, the engines are always going, that's going to create an artificial gravity pointed in the direction of the thrust. This is basically taking advantage of what is usually a disadvantage when we put people into space. When we launch astronauts into orbit, they have these heavy Gs, 2, 3, 5 Gs that are pushing them down into the seat. That's a little bit of a disadvantage. It can be a little bit of a physical strain. But if you keep it at 1 G, you've generated gravity, basically. And so the Rocinante is constructed kind of like an office building, where you have, this is the engine thrusting here. And so it's kind of like an office building where you have floors going like this, one stacked on top of the other, and the gravity points this way, the artificial gravity. And so people walk up and down and can orient themselves that way. Now, of course, the ships are not always under constant gravity. And so one of the things that the Expanse has is that the astronauts wear magnetic boots so that when they are in zero gravity, they can stick to the floor and not float around. that works reasonably well also. I mean, it wouldn't be the same physiologically, but at least you wouldn't be floating around and out of control. One of the little nuances that I noticed about the series on my first viewing, I've watched the first 2 seasons now, is that the characters all have either short hair or hair that's kept very close to the head or something like that. They don't have free-flowing locks. That's a little subtlety, because when you are in zero gravity, if you have long hair, it will float up in space. It will sort of go out like this and make a big poofy ball. And that would be very difficult to do on a TV show. So by having the actors have short hair or hair close to their heads, you avoid that problem, and they can just walk around when they're in their magnetic boots in zero gravity, and they look fine. It doesn't throw the illusion off. So many things I like about this. I also like that the Rocinante is a gunship on a larger ship. She was taken by the crew when the big ship was being attacked, and they have these small ships that they send out, very like the navies of old, the Age of Sail, and even navies today use these smaller ships. She's extremely powerful. In the few times we've seen her use her weapons, she is extraordinarily well armed. And I like when they take her out the first time, they're fighting these Marines, and then suddenly she activates her guns, and it's just game over for the people attacking them. There's another scene towards the end of the first season, and if you've ever played a realistic physics space game, this is really familiar, where the Rocinante is trying to get out of dock, and she's kind of awkward because they've put all this stuff on her to disguise her nature, and the pilot sort of goes this way and then overcorrects back the other way, and it's sort of flopping a bit out of control. Really just love that scene. It's a really realistic scene that shows the realistic physics that they're having here, and how a pilot who wasn't familiar with how the ship moved, with the weight, the extra weight that she has on her, might struggle a bit in a dire circumstance. So, and I have not formed the attachment to the ship because I haven't watched the whole series. I have a feeling it will. I am going to give the Rocinante a preliminary rating of, if I can ever get this, abduct me now. I think this is going to be one of the ships that I will just love. So far, I like everything about her. I like the series very much in the first 2 seasons. And I have a feeling by the time it's in by the end of season 5, this will have a ship that has a lot of meaning to me, and it seems to the people who have watched all 5 seasons. And so I'm giving it a preliminary rating. If I get to the end of the series and I'm like, oh, I overrated it, I'll let you know. But right now, abduct me now for the Rocinante. So the dogs selected the Milano from the Guardians of the Galaxy. I don't have a lot to say about this ship. I do like that in the Guardians of the Galaxy battles that they have the big mothership and it sends out all these fighters and so forth. I like that the Milano is kind of self-sustaining and can survive for a long time on its own and is its own ship in its own right and can do other things and then return to the mothership. It's a very cool looking design. Uses kinetic weapons instead of lasers most of the time, which is nice to see. I'm probably going to rank it right in the middle. Not great, not terrible. There's nothing really terrible about it, but there's nothing really amazing about it either. But I do like the ship. Number 10. Oh, the Juggernaut from Alien. If you had asked me after the first 2 Alien movies what I thought of the Juggernaut, I probably would have ranked it towards the middle. It's nice and alien looking. It's spooky. It has this massive skeleton on board. It's very much like a haunted house. And of course, something bad happens when you go inside of it. And so I probably would have ranked it towards the middle. But having now seen Prometheus and some of the sequels, I'm going to rank this really low. There is so much to dislike about this ship as time has gone on. Like almost everything in the Alien universe, the more they explain it, the less appealing it is. Doesn't seem to have any logical design to it. It just seems to be now a walking plot device where humans come on board and they mess with things and bad things happen to them and none of it makes any sense. And I realize a sense of mystery is part of what makes Alien Alien, but honestly, in this case, I think they're overdoing it with just having mystery for the sake of mystery and having weird things for the sake of weird things. The engineers also appear to be kind of a dumb species to me. And they, this ship crashed because one of their bioweapons got out of control. And I'm sorry, I'm not going to fly on a spaceship that has random bioweapons running around and killing everybody and blowing up everyone's chest. And then it's taken out, in Prometheus at least, in one of the stupidest ways imaginable, where this tiny little Earth ship crashes into it, and these brilliant engineers can't figure out how to shoot it down or evade it or anything like that. And then, of course, there's the famous scene where it crushes Charlize Theron's character together. So this is going right to blows up on the launch pad. This is just, I mean, it probably would have been not great, not terrible after the first two Alien movies, but like everything else, it's sort of sunk with time as they've tried to explain it more and more. And I've been less and less impressed with the engineers and their world. And so right at the bottom, blows up on the launch pad. I don't like this ship. Next ship for the dogs is the Chimera, Admiral Thrawn's ship. Originally from the novels by Timothy Zahn, then eventually from the Rebels series, and now from the Ahsoka series. And sort of stands in for the Star Destroyers in general. I have a positive opinion on the Star Destroyers. They are really fearsome ships. I mean, when you see a Star Destroyer in the series, even though we've seen many of them destroyed, it still conveys a message. One of the things I think the TV series have done well is bring that sort of awe that the Star Destroyer had when we first saw it on our screen in A New Hope. And the Chimera, especially its appearance in the Ahsoka show, is one of the highlights of that show. I know everyone didn't love that show. I like that show quite a bit. And the appearance of the Chimera, it has this intimidating presence. And it's, of course, been torn apart for salvage because it's been needing repairs for the last few years. And the Star Destroyers do have that notable weakness of having those shield generators right above the main bridge. And if you take out the bridge, you basically have destroyed the ship. I mean, the Star Destroyer gets points off for being sort of forward, two-dimensional oriented in its design. But in fact, the Star Destroyer fights three-dimensionally. It doesn't have a weak point. You can't approach it from above or below or behind and find no cannons facing you. So it is able to fight in all directions, which is a positive for a spaceship. So I'm going to rank it probably not great, not terrible, right in the middle. There's nothing particularly bad about these ships. I mean, they are kind of unrealistic, the way they hover in the air and all that stuff. It's Star Wars. What are you going to do? But they are so iconic, and they do have so much power. And I think, actually, I'll probably rank those as enjoy the ride. The Star Destroyer itself, I'd probably rank not great, not terrible, but the Chimera, because it is iconic, because it is connected with Admiral Thrawn, who I think is one of the best characters in the Star Wars canon, and is going to become, I think, a great character as the TV series and the movies progress. I'm going to give it a little bit of a high ranking of enjoy the ride. Number 8, the Highliner from the Dune series. Hard to know what to think of the Highliner. I did a video on Dune. I've talked about the space folding and how that kind of violates faster than light travel and all that sort of thing. It's interesting that we've had 3 different series, and all 3 have given us a very similar look to the Highliner. The one I'm using for the graphic here is from the new movie, which of course we'll see again in the spring. I think the Highliner is probably going to rank towards the middle. I do like this idea that most ships can't travel between the stars, that it takes an enormous amount of power and energy, and in this case, near psychic powers from the navigators to be able to travel between the stars. And so the only way you can do it is to put all the ships on board this Highliner and then move the Highliner from one star system to another. And that's what gives the guild an enormous amount of power. I do like the universe building that is incorporated into the Highliner, and the way it sets the universe up, the way so much in the universe is determined by how exactly interstellar travel is achieved. These are kind of tough. I'm going to grade it not great, not terrible. I mean, it's very functional, which, again, I like in the Dune universe that this ship should be very functional. It doesn't intend to look fancy or anything. The guild, their attitude is basically, here's our ship, have fun. But I'm going to rank it towards the middle, not great, not terrible. Number 6. All right, I have both of the versions of the Heart of Gold on here, and by coincidence, the dogs picked them back to back. So the first one is the Heart of Gold from the TV series, and the second is the Heart of Gold from the movie. The Heart of Gold is kind of more of a joke ship from Douglas Adams, the infinite improbability drive, that they figure out how to generate infinite probability so that the spaceship can be everywhere in the universe at once, and then settle down to wherever they actually want to land the ship, and so forth. The joke I think that Adams was trying to make was on quantum mechanics, that this is going to get kind of complicated, but subatomic particles like electrons, we don't think that they're actually solid objects. What we think is that they are distributions of probability, and they only become solid until one point when you actually interact with them. And so if you have an electron in one particular place, there's a probability, however small, that it will suddenly jump to the outside, what we call quantum tunneling, jump and move around very randomly or suddenly, and even faster than the speed of light. That quantum particles can, in certain circumstances, move faster than the speed of light. The example he says is that they used to generate finite fields of probability to, at a party, make the hostess's undergarments jump 1 foot to the left. Basically, you would calculate how improbable it is for all the molecules in the underwear to move 1 foot, which would be a 1 with a zillion zeros after it. Once you've done that, I guess, find that probability or something like that. Trying to analyze the science of Star Wars will drive you mad. Trying to analyze the science of Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy will drive you beyond madness. Of course, beyond madness is where quantum mechanics lies. But in addition to that, you have a lot of other aspects of the Heart of Gold that are really funny. These doors that anticipate that you're going to walk towards them, and they open automatically and say, glad to be of service. And you have, of course, Eddie the shipboard computer, who's a really funny character. So there's a lot to like about this ship. I'm going to rank the BBC one as, I'm going to say enjoy the ride. As silly as it is, if you have a ship that is silly, but silly in a way that makes me laugh, I think you've done something quite special. And especially the more you know about physics and computers and so forth, the funnier the Heart of Gold is. I'm actually going to rank the movie version a little lower at probably actually down at fails at MaxQ. I don't like the shape of it. The Heart of Gold in the TV series is more just like Douglas Adams described it in the novels and in the radio show. And I understand they're trying to do something different. And I do like the silliness of having it change into different shapes, and especially the Douglas Adams face at the end. But I'm actually going to rank it a little bit lower just because, like a lot of things in the movie, I did like the movie, but it didn't quite hit as for me the way the TV series did. So I might revisit those. All right, the next one, the pod from the Arrival. These are the alien ships that just sort of show up. I really found these to be interesting. They are very alien. They're very different from anything we would ever conceive. Very different from anything. They're not just airplanes with warp engines on the back or flying saucers or something like that. They're something completely alien, and it fits in with the theme of Arrival, where the aliens are very different from us, not just breathing different atmospheres, but experiencing time in a different way, communicating in a different way. I like the way that they enhance the mystery and kind of subtle menace of the movie. Of you don't know if the aliens are friendly or not, you don't know what their intentions are. I'm going to rank these as enjoy the ride. I would love to get aboard one of those ships and see the technology, see the design, see how different they are on the inside than ours are, and what radical differences in design are inside that are implied by that radical exterior. So I'm actually going to rank that kind of high. Oh, this one should be interesting. The Gunstar from The Last Starfighter. The Last Starfighter is kind of a movie, if you're Gen X, it's a movie that you kind of liked. You were a teenager at the time this came out. The idea of this video game making this kid into a galactic hero and so forth, and getting the girl at the end. There's a lot of silliness in The Last Starfighter. They have this frontier that keeps the bad guys out. And I'm like, is this frontier a sphere? Is it a wall? Can they just go over it and so forth? It is one of the first that used a lot of CG, and it looks kind of clunky now, but at the time it looked kind of cool. The Gunstar, there are things I really like about this ship. One of the things I really love is that it has a pilot and a gunner. That the pilot is flying the ship, trying to stay away from the enemy, and the gunner is engaging in 3 dimensions with a pod that turns around and can engage in all 3 directions. And of course, it has the kind of silliness of the Death Blossom, where it fires weapons in all directions and can take out entire fleets. There's a lot of silliness in The Last Starfighter, but it has a decent heart. It's a fun movie to watch. The last time I watched it, I wasn't too embarrassed that I had liked it as a kid. And the Gunstar, it's a very typical space plane sort of thing, but I do like that extra touch of having the 2 different pilots and having them be able to engage in that one. So I'm going to rate this as not great, not terrible. It is kind of silly that it can take out an entire fleet by itself. So that's going to knock it down a peg. But overall, as starfighters go in movies, this is actually a pretty decent one. The Borg Cube. The Borg Cube is definitely not a ship I would want to be on. But if you were a Borg, I think you would enjoy it quite a bit. The thing I like about the Borg ship is, like the Arrival pod, how alien it is. And this is emphasized when Q shows it to them, that it's very different from anything humans have built. It is not pretty. It is not aesthetic. It is entirely 100% functional. There is no symmetry. There is no grand design to make everything work out. So it's just patched together to work as best it can. And the Borg Cube is incredibly deadly. It adapts very quickly. The Enterprise finds itself completely outmatched when it faces one the first time. And in probably the best of the Next Generation movies, First Contact, it takes out the entire Star Fleet because of the tactics it learned from Captain Picard. Again, not one I would be on, but if you are a Borg, enjoy the ride. This is iconic. It is one of the times when Star Trek stepped outside its comfort zone and did something really interesting and innovative. And yeah, I'm gonna rank that pretty high because I think that's a very unique ship. Again, I don't want to enjoy the ride, but if you like being a mindless cyborg, knock yourself out. Now, this is going to be an interesting one. We're talking about now the Liberator from the TV series Blake 7. Probably some of you who watch this channel have seen Blake 7. Probably a lot of you have not. It is difficult to find in this country. Blake 7 is one of the best sci-fi TV series that has ever been made. It was made by Terry Nation, who created the Daleks for Doctor Who. Even if you have not seen Blake 7, you have felt its influence. Almost every TV series, especially ones like Babylon 5 and Deep Space Nine, have a very strong influence of Blake 7. It is the story of, you have this oppressive federation that is trying to get mind control over everyone and control everything that's going on and murders dissidents and so forth. And the main character, Blake, was this political dissident that they framed for a crime he didn't commit, and now they're sending him into exile on a distant planet. And while there, he and a bunch of criminals that are going with him encounter this super advanced ship called the Liberator, take it over, and use it to fight against the Federation. By all means, I should probably rank the Liberator a little low. It has all its weapons face forward, so it can't fight in three directions. It uses neutron blasters, which sound good, but don't actually mean anything. Neutrons are a heavy, uncharged particle, so you wouldn't want to use those in a blaster. It has a teleport system. It has all kinds of magic technology. But I love the series. This is a series that is very close to my heart. This was also one of my sister's favorite series. It has some of the things like moral ambiguity that we associate with more modern shows. Blake's commitment to freedom begins to diverge into fanaticism, where he is willing to sacrifice the lives of millions of people in order to advance his cause. My brother would want me to rate this very low because the computer Zen on board, he always called it the potato, which is not undeserved. But I'm gonna rank this Abduct Me Now just because the Liberator is such an iconic ship for me personally. This is one where, objectively, if I had not watched the series and I were not familiar with this ship, I would probably rank it not great, not terrible, maybe even lower. But because this is one of the reasons I like to talk about series I'm familiar with, because of the way the Liberator, what it meant to the series, because it was so iconic, because it so defined the series, and especially, spoiler warning, the ultimate fate of the Liberator, I'm going to have to rank it as Abduct Me Now because from the time I was about 12 years old, I fantasized about being on the Liberator. And so it's going to, like the TARDIS, it's going to rank way up there, even though objectively, scientifically, it's nonsense. The Eye of Scion from the Ahsoka series. I do like the way the Ahsoka series did the travel to another galaxy, that it was beyond the power of most warp engines, and so they needed to build this gigantic spaceship with really powerful engines that would be able to jump into hyperspace and get to the external galaxy. It is designed very specifically to dock with the Chimera. It does result in some really beautiful shots from the Ahsoka series. whether it's rising out of the clouds or going to Dathomir and so forth. So I don't have any particularly strong feelings about it. I'm going to probably rank it not great, not terrible. Oh, this was one that was requested quite a bit, and one of my favorite all-time ships. And that is the Red Dwarf from the series Red Dwarf. This is another one. If you have not seen it, and probably some of you have not, run out right now, pause this, run out and get Red Dwarf and start watching it. The first 2 seasons are good, but the 3rd through 6th seasons are just some of the best science fiction that's been done. And it's like a comedy science fiction, but it also can be serious and have really good ideas. I don't want to spoil it for those of you who haven't watched it, but it always has really interesting ideas, even if they aren't quite scientifically accurate. The conceit behind the Red Dwarf series is that the interstellar mining ship Red Dwarf, Dave Lister, is put into hibernation because of an infraction on board. There is then a radiation leak that kills all the crew and contaminates the ship, and the computer can't wake him up for 3 million years, after which all the crew are dead. The cat that he released into the hold is evolved into this cat humanoid species, and trust me, this is a crazy series, but it's great. Go out and watch it. I do like, even though it's not a beautiful ship, I like that it's not beautiful. It's a mining ship. It's not supposed to be the flagship of the fleet or a luxury liner or something like that. It's supposed to be functional. It has pipes sticking out and so forth. I like that the ship is designed for long journeys, that it has gymnasiums and pools and all this stuff on board. And it seems to be pretty self-sustaining in terms of being able to manage a crew. I like that it doesn't actually land on planets. It has the Starbug and so forth to send out the crew to land on planets and explore. I like that, as far as I remember, it is not armed. Why would it be armed? It's a mining ship. On its own merits, I would probably rate this not great, not terrible. It's never really been clear to me what the mission of the Red Dwarf was, whether it was mining asteroids, in which case that orbit would have just stayed in the solar system, or whether it's mining from other stars and bringing it back to Earth, which makes no sense, but would let it go very far from Earth. So I've never been very clear on that, but I'm going to rank that enjoy the ride, just because, again, it's a great series and it is a very iconic ship. And anytime that you see the Red Dwarf appear on screen, it's going to make me grin. The Klingon Bird of Prey, and I'm specifying the Klingon Bird of Prey. I may talk about the Romulan ships in a future video. I'm actually not going to rank this terribly high. I realize a lot of people are going to get mad at me in the comments about this with Star Trek, and especially given that I've ranked some kind of silly ships above it and so forth. But the Bird of Prey is kind of a one-trick pony. It stays cloaked, and then it springs out and attacks, which is useful, but I've never been that sold on a cloaking device, how useful that would be. And in Star Trek 6, of course, they're able to override the cloaking device and destroy the ship. The weapons all face forward, which is a huge disadvantage in a 3-dimensional battle. And even the Enterprise can shoot backwards and forwards and up and down and so forth. I realize this might be a Klingon thing where they always want to be facing their opponent, but facing your opponent is great when you're only facing one opponent. If they're coming at you from multiple directions, you're at a huge disadvantage designing a ship this way. For a ship that is supposed to be from a warrior race and supposed to be, this deadly thing, I've never been that impressed by the Bird of Prey. The only time it really seems to take names is when the crews are kind of incompetent. So I'm going to rate this as fails at MaxQ. Go ahead, thrash me in the comments. This has never been my favorite ship. All right, the Motherships from the V series. So for those of you not familiar, the TV miniseries V, The Final Battle, and then a short-lived series were about these alien visitors who come to Earth. And at first they cast themselves as benevolent. They're going to get rid of all our pollution and blah, blah, blah. And then they're revealed as these lizards hiding in human-like skins, and they're going to take all our water and kidnap a bunch of us to eat and so forth. And then the humans develop a bioweapon and chase them off the planet. That plot should probably sound familiar to you. It's basically Independence Day before there was Independence Day. It actually has a little bit more complexity to it than Independence Day did, which is not hard since there are children's books that have more complexity than Independence Day. But like the aliens there, they're defeated pretty easily. They never use the power that they have. Their whole scheme to fool humanity doesn't make any sense, because they are so much more powerful than us. Why not just arrive and take all the water and take us and so forth? And the motherships are really not impressive. They're not very powerfully armed. The rare times we see them flying or in battle are not terribly impressive, and the visitors seem to be very afraid of an enemy alien species that probably can kick their butt. I'm going to rank this, it fails at MaxQ. Not terrifically impressive. I think they could have done something way more interesting than this than they did. The final one will be the iconic X-Wing from Star Wars. And for this one, I'm going to take some knowledge from outside the movies and canon, and that is from one of my favorite series of video games, the X-Wing video games of the 1990s. One of the things I like about the Rebel fleet is that there are roles that are played. This is sort of seen in the movies, way more seen in the video games, where you have to actually have strategy and so forth. You have the A-Wing, which is a fast, maneuverable interceptor. You have the Y-Wing and later the B-Wing, which is a heavy bomber that disables and destroys bigger ships. And then in the middle, you have the X-Wing, which is what they call a space superiority fighter, which basically does it all. It can dogfight with TIE fighters, it can attack capital ships, and so forth. One of the best representations of this on the screen has actually been in Rogue One, with the fantastic Battle of Scarif, where they have the Y-Wings do their job and disable and damage a Star Destroyer, which then the Hammerhead Corvette takes care of. The U-Wings are on the surface of the planet taking out walkers and then landing troops, and then the X-Wings are kind of trying to do everything at once. They're on the ground assaulting the walkers, they're in space fighting the TIE fighters, they're going after the capital ships, and that really is a representation of what the X-Wing is to me, that it's a do-it-all fighter. Very similar to kind of like the F-15 or something like that in the real-life Air Force. Of course, the X-Wing is very iconic, basically the symbol of Star Wars. When the X-Wing shows up at the end of Mandalorian Season 2, everyone's antennae twittered because, it's such an iconic ship. Whose ship X-Wing is that? Oh, it's in black and white. They aren't telling us. They're building up the mystery here. What's really interesting in the video game world is that they then created a game called TIE Fighter, where you fight for the Empire. At first, you're fighting like T-16s and stuff like that, which are kind of weak fighters. Eventually Y-Wings, and then the X-Wing shows up. And when the X-Wing shows up, it is a game changer, literally, for the video game. That the X-Wing is what gave the Rebel Alliance a chance. It was so much better than the TIE Fighter, and so able to tangle with multitudes of them and take them out, that it changed the balance. So that even though the Empire still vastly outnumbered the Rebels, in these small skirmishes that the Rebellion was trying to get in, they would completely outclass the Imperial fighters. The X-Wing, I'm going to rank that enjoy the ride. It is scientifically unrealistic. I mean, I will admit that. I'll be the first to admit that a spaceship that makes U-turns in space and maneuvers down trenches and is, dogfighting at, warp speeds and so forth is unrealistic. But it is so iconic, and it is used so well in the TV series, in the movies, in the video games especially, as a way of that the Rebellion changed the game against the Empire, that I'm going to bump it up from not great, not terrible to enjoy the ride. So, as with last time, my list is a little top heavy. Look, I'm a science fiction fan, so even though I am a scientist, and when I look at this, the only ship on this list that is scientifically realistic is probably the Rocinante, and maybe because we're saying wibbly wobbly, alieny, weeny stuff, the pod from Arrival, those are the only two that are realistic. You have to suspend disbelief. And the question is, which of these ships makes me suspend disbelief? Which of these ships is iconic enough and within its own universe realistic enough that I'm going to say, yes, I love that ship. No, I don't like that ship. And so even though most of these ships are not very realistic in terms of actual physics, in terms of actual spaceships, I'm going to rank them all pretty well because, if you make a ship I like, and one that appeals to me on that sort of gut level, I'm going to really fall for it. And that's really what we're looking for in science fiction. Something that makes us suspend disbelief, draws us in, makes us punch the air when the ship shows up. If I see a ship show up and a grin appears on my face, there's no way it's being ranked low, no matter how unrealistic it might be. So that's the list for this time. Please, as last time, be sure to fill the comments with ships that you would like me to do. I probably will, if I do another episode of this, have to break my rule of being familiar with the ships, but I will try to at least read up on them and get familiar with them so I can at least comment intelligently on them. This might be my last video of the year. I have a couple that I'm working on, but I don't know that they will get posted. I'm going to travel to visit family and so forth. So if not, this has been a really wonderfully successful year for the channel. Thanks to all of you subscribing and recommending it and boosting up in YouTube's algorithm and so forth. I can't begin to say how humbled I am by all the views and all the likes and all the nice comments. We have a really kind and thoughtful commentariat for this channel, and that makes me really happy that you guys are such a good crowd and so appreciative, and it makes me want to do more videos and do better videos. So hopefully 2024 will be an even bigger year. Again, if you have stuff you want to see me do in 2024, drop a comment. I'd love to hear it. And I have more recommendations than I know what to do with right now, but I'm always looking for more because I have this nagging fear one day I'm going to run out of ideas and not be able to do any more videos. So until we talk again next time, happy holidays to everyone. Merry Christmas, Happy New Year, Happy Hanukkah. And I'm Mike Siegel. I write for Ordinary Times. Thank you for watching.